Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So today we'll discuss about special random variables, and the outline of today's class would be, we'll start with some of the inequalities which one requires when we don't have information about the exact probability distribution. So namely, we'll talk about Markov's and Chebyshev's inequalities. We'll also talk about law of large numbers. Then it will be followed by some of the special random variables, namely the binomial random variable, geometric random variable, and negative binomial random variable. So there are many of them, but we'll select few which are widely used in day-to-day life, and today we'll discuss about the discrete random variables, special type of discrete random variables, and I've picked 3 of the important ones, and we'll continue with others in subsequent lectures. So we'll start with Markov's inequality. So given a random variable x whose distribution is unknown, please mark my words, whose distribution is unknown. We don't know about what probability distribution they have. So when the distribution is unknown, but whose expected value, let's say mu, is known, we may want to ask how likely it is for that random variable x to be far from mu, or how likely it is for this random variable to be very large. So this would give us some idea of the spread of the distribution, although not perhaps the complete picture. So what Markov's inequality tells is that if x is a random variable that takes only non-negative values, then for any value a greater than 0, a is a number, then the probability of x greater or equal to a is less than or equal to the expectation value of x scaled by a. And let us show when x is a continuous random variable with a certain probability distribution function fx. You can also do the same exercise for a case of discrete random variable. Okay, so for this proof we'll use fx, but normally you apply Markov's inequality where you do not have any information about the probability mass function or the probability density function. So you can use the conventional definition of the expected value, and since we have started that x only takes non-negative values, so expectation value of x for a continuous random variable can be written as the given formula. So it's x times fx integrated over all x values lying from 0 to infinity. And by the following steps, so from this integral can be broken into 2 different regions, namely from 0 to a and from a to infinity. So definitely your expectation value is greater than, let's say, a to infinity x fx dx, and since a lies in that region, it is also greater or equal to integral of a times f to the power x dx, and where the limit goes from a to infinity, and which is nothing but a times probability of x being greater or equal to a. So that shows that probability of x greater than equal to a is less or equal to expectation value of that random variable scaled by the value of a. So now Markov's inequality tells us that as long as x doesn't take negative values, the probability that x, let's say, is twice as large as its expected value is at most half, which we can see here by just setting a is equal to twice of e to expectation value of x. So more generally, we can say that the probability that a random variable is at least k times its expected value is at most 1 by k. So we should notice that the only things we assumed about this random variable are that it can't be negative and it has finite mean. We don't need to know anything about its variance or its probability distribution in general. So this inequality gives the best possible bound, but there are cases for which Markov's inequality also provides a terrible bound. So let's just take a simple example to see the application of Markov's inequality. So let the average grade on the upcoming science examination is 70%. Give an upper bound on the proportion of students who score at least 90%. So the probability, see here we don't know about the distribution of the grades and all that. So the x greater than 0.9 is 7 by 9. So you just simply apply Markov's inequality and you can see that. Fortunately, we can say a bit more about probability distribution if you know its variance as well as its expected value. And there comes this Chebyshev's inequality. So it gives a bound on the probability that x is far from its expected value. Okay, so let's say what it states. So Chebyshev's inequality states that if x is a random variable with mu and variance sigma square. So here we know the variance, but we don't know the probability distribution. Okay, then for any value, let's say k greater than 0, so we can talk about how far this x is from mu. So x minus mu, so let's say the absolute value of x minus mu, the probability of absolute value of x minus mu being greater than or equal to k is always less or equal to sigma square by k square, where sigma square is the variance of the random variable x. So this we can see, or we can easily prove by using Markov's inequality. So as x minus mu square is a non-negative random number, and we know that Markov's inequality is applicable for positive numbers, we can directly use Markov's inequality. So we can write probability of x minus mu square, which is a positive number, greater than k square is less than the expectation value of x minus mu square by k square. So that is directly coming from our statement of Markov's inequality. And x minus mu square greater than k square is equivalent to saying that x minus mu is greater or equal to k. So the probability won't change. So you can also write probability of absolute value of x minus mu greater than k is also less or equal to expectation value of x minus mu whole square by k square. But you can see that the numerator is nothing but your variance. Okay. So, and you can see this is exactly the statement of Chebyshev's inequality. So you can also replace k by k sigma so that you can have another version of this inequality. Let's say probability of x minus mu, the absolute value, greater than k sigma is less or equal to 1 by k square. So you can see that Chebyshev's inequality gives a bound on the probability that x is far from its expected value. So the importance of both these inequalities, namely your Markov's and Chebyshev's inequality, is that they enable us to derive bounds on probabilities when only the mean or both the mean and the variance of the probability distribution are known. Of course, if the actual distribution were known, then the desired probabilities could be exactly computed and we need not resort to these bounds. But when you don't have any information about the distribution functions, then and you have some information about the mean, or many times you have information about mean and variance, then you can use these two inequalities to at least give a bound on the calculation of probabilities. So let's do a simple example on application of Chebyshev's inequality. So the example says the process of drilling holes in PCBs produce diameters with a standard deviation of 0.1 millimeter. So how many diameters must be measured so that the probability is at least 8 by 9 that the average of the measured diameters is within 0.005 of the process mean diameter. So you have the process mean diameter, which is mu. You don't have any information about the distribution of these diameters, and you know the, let's say, standard deviation of the produced diameters. Okay, so let x1, x2, xn, so we have to find the n, how many diameters must be measured. So let x1, x2, xn be the random variables that denote the diameters of the hole. Okay, so it's talking about the process mean diameter. So we'll also calculate average mean diameter is nothing but you add on the values associated with these random variables and then divided by the total number of your sample or the total number of diameters you have measured. And you can see that the variance of such a thing would be sigma square by n, because all these random variables are independent. Okay, so now you have information about the variance and you have to calculate the number of diameters which you need to measure so that the average of measured diameters is within 0.005 of the process mean diameter. That means your x bar minus mu, where x bar is the average, is given, which is your 0.005. So you can use Chebyshev's inequality, which states that probability of x, absolute value of x bar minus mu greater than k sigma is less or equal to 1 by k square. Now we know what is sigma because the standard deviation is given, and we have also computed the standard variance for x bar. So standard deviation for the average would be the square root of the variance. Okay, so now if you choose k is equal to 3, so we can state that probability of absolute value of x bar minus mu greater or equal to k times sigma. Here sigma is the standard deviation of the average. Okay, so it is square root of 0.01 square by n is less or equal to 1 by 9 because our k is equal to 3. So we can just manipulate this statement to say that probability of x minus mu, absolute value of x minus mu, less than k times sigma is greater than 8 by 9. Okay, this is what we wanted to have, right? So you just can put that x minus mu, x bar minus mu is given to be that it should lie within 0.005. So you can take the value to be 0.005 and equate with the right hand side, and then you get n is equal to 36. So just by simpling here, listen, we don't have any information about the probability distributions, but we can still give a bound on the probability, given that we only had information about, let's say, the standard deviation. Now from both these inequality there follows this law of large numbers, which states that if x1, x2, xn be a sequence of independent and identically distributed random variables. This is very important, that they should be independent and they should be identically distributed. I mean, they should come from the same population so that each have the same mean or the same expected value mu and the same variance sigma square. Okay, because they are all independent and they are all identically distributed. Since they are identically distributed, the moments would be equal, hence they have the same mean and they have the same variance. So then for any epsilon greater than 0, we can state that x1 plus x2 dot 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 xn by n, which is nothing more than your mean, average, of those random values minus mu. The probability of this quantity being greater than epsilon, it tends to 0 as your n tends to very large. Let's say as n tends to infinity, as your number of sampling or your sample size increases, then this probability tends to 0. So this can be easily, you can just easily see it from the application of Chebyshev's inequality. So since x1, x2, xn are your random samples, so the expectation value of this average is mu, because each one is independent. So you can write the expectation value as the sum over the expectation values of each of them, and each have the value mu, so the numerator will be n mu by n, so the expectation value would be mu. Similarly, variance would be sigma square by n. So you have information on mu, you have information on the variance, so you can easily apply Chebyshev's inequality to see that this probability would be less than sigma square by n, which is the variance, by epsilon square. And from this expression you can see that this probability tends to 0 as your n tends to infinity, or if n becomes large, you can see on the right hand side that value tends to 0. So this is just a very simple application of these inequalities, and this is famously known as law of large numbers, and we'll discuss more about it when we do the central limit theorem. So now with the tools that we know what are random variables, what are their probability distributions, and we also know about the expectation value, the variances, the different moments of a distribution. Together with these inequalities, now we'll talk about the special random variables. So the basic idea, if you remember, the basic idea behind discussing random variables is that when certain conditions are met, we can derive a general formula for the probability mass function of, let's say, a discrete random variable. So we can then use that formula to calculate probabilities concerning rather than resorting to the first principles. Okay. So sometimes the probability calculations can be tedious. In those cases, we might want to take advantage of cumulative probability tables that others have created. So that's what normally is practiced. So as it turns out, you'll see that there are some specific distributions that are used over and over in practice. Thus, they have been given special names. And there's a random experiment behind each of these distributions. Since these random experiments model a lot of real life phenomenon, these special distributions are used frequently in different applications. That is why they have been given a name, and we'll devote few lectures to study them. So we'll provide the, let's say for random discrete random variables, we'll talk about the probability mass functions, while for continuous ones we'll talk about the underlying probability density functions for all these special random variables. And rather than trying to memorize the distribution functions, we would try to understand the random experiment behind each of them. So if you understand the random experiments, you can simply derive the distribution functions when you need them. Although it might seem that there are a lot of formulas in this section or in this part of the discussion, there are, however, very few new concepts. So I would say do not get intimidated by the large number of formulas, but rather look at each distribution as a fresh problem. Okay. So to start with, we'll first talk about the special discrete random variables, and then slowly we'll move towards the continuous ones. So the simplest discrete random variable is a Bernoulli random variable, and this is named after the Swiss mathematician Jacob Bernoulli, and it talks about experiments or trial which can have only two possible outcomes. Okay, so a trial with only two possible outcomes is used so frequently as a building block of a random experiment, that it is called, also it's called a Bernoulli trial. So it is usually assumed that the trials that constitute the random experiment are independent. This implies that the outcome from one trial has no effect on the outcome to be obtained from any other trial. And it is also reasonable to assume that the probability of a success for each trial is constant. So we have only two outcomes. So, and normally we denote these outcomes as success or failure. So the way you describe a success or failure, it completely depends upon the person who is doing the random experiment. And conventionally we assign x is equal to 1 when the outcome is a success. And the way I define the success or you define the success is completely your decision. And x is equal to 0 when it is a failure. Okay. So then the probability mass function, so you have only two outcomes. And it's a discrete random variable obviously. So the probability mass function is p x is equal to 1 is p, where small p lies between 0 to 1 and it is the probability of success. So obviously the probability of failure would be 1 minus p, which would be attributed to the other outcome, which you as a number you denote it as with x is equal to 0. So then a random variable x is said to be a Bernoulli random variable if its probability mass function is given by the above equations. So what are the equations? Since it has two outcomes, so normally we denote them as success and failure. Success is attributed the numerical value 1 while the failure is given the value 0. So probability of x is equal to 1 is p, which is the probability that the trial is a success. Hence, the other outcome should be associated with the probability 1 minus p. So, the expectation value of the random variable is the probability that the random variable equals 1, which is obvious. So, even if you calculate the expectation value from first principles, you can see that the expectation value of the random variable is p. So the probability of success is denoted by p and the probability of failure is denoted by 1 minus p. So that is your Bernoulli random variable. It is the simplest discrete random variable and it constitutes the trials of many other discrete random variables. Okay. So we'll see its application when we discuss about the binomial random variable. Now let us see the following examples. So if you flip a coin 20 times and let your random variable is the number of tails you obtain or the number of heads you obtain. Okay, because it has only two possible outcomes each try. It will be either heads or tails. Otherwise, you can consider another example. A machine tool produces 2% defective parts and X denote the number of defective parts in the 25 parts produced. Okay. So when it produces a part, it can be either defective or it would be a good one. Okay, so again it has only two outcomes. So each sample of air has 10% chance of containing a particular pollutant. So whether the sample would have the pollutant or won't have, and the probability of getting that pollutant is 10%. Okay, it's the number of air samples that contain the rare molecule in the next 20 samples analyzed. So see here X is always a number. Try to see the examples here. Number of tails obtained or the number of defective parts in the next 25 parts produced or the number of air samples that contain the rare molecule in the next 20 samples analyzed. So these examples illustrate that a general probability model that can include this type of experiments would be very useful. Okay, so each of these random experiments can be thought of as consisting of a series of repeated random trials. Like when you flip 20, when you flip your coin 20 times, so that would constitute an experiment. Okay. Similarly, the production of 25 parts in experiment 2 to let's say the point 2 and so forth. So the random variable in each case is a count of the number of trials that meet a specified criterion, right? So in all of these examples, these are the number of is the count of the number of trials that meet a specified criterion, be it observing heads or observing tails. So those are your specified criteria, and then your random variable is the number of counts. Okay. And you can see that the outcome from each trial either meets the criteria that X counts or it doesn't. Consequently, each trial can be summarized as resulting in either a success or a failure. Okay, so each of the trial would have only two outcomes. Either it would meet your criterion, so that you would term it as a success, or it won't. So you will call that trial a failure. For example, in the multiple choice examination, for each question only the choice that is correct is considered a success. Okay, so choosing any one of the three incorrect choice results in the trial being summarized as a failure. Okay, so the term success and failures are just labels. Okay, we can just tell them A or B or 0 and 1. Okay,